Welcome back to another class on laws of cooking on Shabbat. This will be part 4 of the shiur. Today we want to discuss another type of action that if you do on Shabbat, it is not as severe as doing something by accident or on purpose. It's less severe. It is called mitasek. Rabotai, what is mitasek? Mitasek, if I can give you a general term, it means doing something by accident. But that's not the same accident that we've been speaking in part 3 of the class. We gave different scenarios. What does it mean by accident? This mitasek, it's also by accident, but it is a lesser form of by accident. For example, if a person forgot that today is Shabbat, and he went and he cooked food on the fire, the halakha is going to tell us, the person who cooked the food on the fire and everyone else, they're not allowed to benefit from that food on Shabbat. However, after Shabbat, the person that cooked the food on the fire and everyone else is able to go ahead and eat from that food immediately. And they don't have to wait the amount of time that the food was made. Again, Rabotai, this is called Kedei Sheyasu. We spoke about this in part 3 of the class. Now that is called shogeg, accident. Now mitasek is also another form of accident, but it's a lesser form of an accident. For example, the same case, a person was mitasek. On Shabbat, he went, he took a pot of food, he placed it on the fire, cooked the food. In this case of mitasek, we're going to tell you not only is everyone else benefiting from it on Shabbat, also the person that cooked it on Shabbat can go ahead and eat it on Shabbat. This halakha you didn't hear before. One more time. If a person is mitasek in this pot of food, he was an accident. We'll see, the halakha brewer is going to tell us, Rav David Yosef Shlita is going to tell us what happened. He took a pot of food. He thought that there's no food inside of it. He placed it on the fire. It was open fire. Just when he took the pot of food, he didn't know that there was food inside. He thought it was empty. He placed it. The next thing he knows, the house is smelling good. He opens the pot, he sees there's food over there. That's an accident, but a different form of an accident and a lesser form of an accident. It's called a mitasek. In this situation, we're going to allow the person that cooked the food on Shabbat and everyone else to be able to benefit from that food on Shabbat itself. Because again, there's shogeg and there's a mitasek. Shogeg is a little bit higher. That accident is a little bit more severe. Mitasek is also by accident, but it's a different form of accident and it's a lesser form of an accident. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and we're going to define what does mitasek mean. Now, Rabotai, we spoke about Maaseh Shabbat in part 3 of the shiur. Today we want to discuss mitasek. So, Rav David Yosef Shlita is going to speak about over. He says, what happens here at Maaseh Shabbat? Shenaseh b'mitasek. If you had a malacha which was done on Shabbat, but it was done because the person was mitasek. It was an accident, but it was a lesser form of an accident. What does mitasek mean? Let's define it. Im naaset malacha al yido. If the malacha, remember whenever we use the language of malacha, it means forbidden work. If the malacha was done through the person, belo sheyada klal be'ota sha'a she'oseh malacha, that he didn't know at all at that moment that he was doing a malacha. That is the definition of mitasek. One more time. If a person was doing a real malacha on Shabbat, not knowing at that time that he's doing the malacha on Shabbat, that is called mitasek. Now, let's go ahead and give a few examples to clarify this concept of mitasek. Ukigon, and for example, Shenishan alakir b'Shabbat. A person leaned on the wall on Shabbat. V'lo sam libo. He didn't pay attention. Lekach to that. Sheyesh sham mateg shel hashmal. Sheyesh sham mateg shel hachashmal. He didn't pay attention that you have over there an electric switch. Umachmat ken nidlak haor. Because that was the case, the light went on. Mutar lehinot meor ze b'Shabbat. You're allowed to go ahead and benefit from this light on Shabbat. Sharei en be'oto maaseh malechet machshevet klal. Because you don't have in that act malechet machshevet at all. Now, we spoke about this before, but let's try to go ahead and define what is malechet machshevet. Again, malacha is a forbidden labor. Machshevet means machshava, thought. That means at the time when I'm doing the malacha, in order to make me liable on Shabbat, I have to know what I'm doing is wrong. It has to be basically a planned malacha. For example, I know I'm not allowed to cook. And now knowing that I take the pot and I put it on the fire. That's called malechet machshevet. When in my mind I'm planning, I'm knowingly going ahead and desecrating Shabbat. That's called malechet machshevet. But in our case, the reason why we're going to allow you to go ahead and benefit from this light on Shabbat, because in that ma'aseh, in that act, by leaning on the electric switch and by turning on the lights, there was no malechet machshevet. You didn't plan to do it. You didn't even know the switch was there. It happened by accident. Somebody might have pushed you. Rabotai, was this an accident? 100%. But it's a different type of accident than what we've been learning up to now. This, Rabotai, is called mitasek. On Shabbat, you have many cases like this. Many, many cases. So one more time. Im na'aseh ha'malacha al yedo belo sheyada klal be'oto sha'a she'oseh malacha. If there was a malacha, a forbidden labor that was done through the person without knowing at all at that moment that he was doing the malacha, and for example, Shenishan alakir b'Shabbat, he leaned on the wall on Shabbat, he didn't pay attention that there's an electric switch. Because of that, the light went on. No problem. Mutar lehenod me'orze b'Shabbat. You're allowed to benefit from this light on Shabbat. Sharei en be'oto Shabbat malechet machshevet klal. Because because you don't have in that act of leaning on the electric switch and turning on the light, in that act you don't have the malechet machshevet. You didn't plan it, you didn't know about it, it just happened by itself. That, Rabotai, is called an accident, but a different type of accident. Okay. Continues the Rav David Yosef Shlita. V'kol sheken, and how much more so, Im nitkal baderech hilucho. What happens if a person tripped on the way he was walking? B'mateg hachashmal. As you were walking, you tripped. Now, what happens when you tripped? You hit your hand on the electric switch. V'nidlak hachashmal. And now the chashmal, the light went on, the electricity went on. Shemutar lehenod me'orze b'Shabbat. You're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to benefit from this light on Shabbat. Now, Rabotai, this is very, very important. All this, Rabotai, is called mitasek. I was in somebody's house for Shabbat. It was a lot of people. And one of the, again, when you have a lot of women in the kitchen, right? And if you have, because remember, some people use the blech, the electric plate. Some people use the fire with the oven knobs, and they put the metal sheet on top. So I was in such a house where they had the metal sheet on top, and they had the knobs, where you make the fire higher or lower. So since there were many people over there, one of the knobs that was on low fire, I guess the woman over there told me that when she passed by, she turned on the fire to make it high, which basically bettered the food. So there was somebody else in that house. They started making a whole commotion. You made the fire higher. It's asur to eat it. This is accident. Or she wanted to even say that it was by purpose because she didn't know how it happened. But when I asked the people in the kitchen, I asked them, I said, how did this happen? So the lady said, as I was passing by, there was not enough space between the counter and the oven. I hit it. I felt something hitting my behind. And I guess that's how the fire went on. Can you eat from that food? 1,000,000%. Rabotai, I don't have to tell you how much commotion there was. When people don't know halakha, this food is asur, and they wanted to embarrass. They were doing so many isurim d'oraita, not knowing what the halakha is. This is another form, an example of what does it mean mit'asek. You didn't have kavanah. You didn't even plan on making the fire higher. It just happened so. Okay, mit'asek. It's an accident, but not an accident where I forget today is Shabbat and I turn on the fire with my own hands where I'm actually doing the malacha. No, that's not the type of accident. That type of accident is a different type of accident which we spoke in part 3 of the class. So that's what Rav David Yosef Shlita is telling us. He's explaining it to us like this. If a person leans on the wall or somebody pushes you and you hit the switch and you turn on the lights, that's called mit'asek. How much more so if you were walking and you tripped and by accident you hit your wall on the electric switch and you turned it on, that's called also mit'asek. And all these situations, or the case that I gave you with not being able to pass through such a narrow space between the oven and the kitchen counter table, and you turn and you made the knob higher, no problem. All these cases are called mit'asek, and you are allowed to go ahead and benefit from the food, from the light, and from whatever else. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita. V'chein, and so too. V'chein, and so too. If a person went ahead and he placed a pot on top of the fire, at the time when you placed it, you thought it was empty. You know what happens sometimes, especially if you're living in a very small apartment, or your kitchen's very small, or you have a lot of guests over, you need space. So you ask somebody to move the pot over to the other side. So the person thinks the pot is empty, they pick up the pot and they put it on the fire. At the time when he's not thinking that there's food, he thinks it's empty because they need the space. So that's what he says, if a person went ahead and he placed a pot on the fire, at the time when he placed the pot on the fire, he thought it was empty. And afterwards it became known, afterwards it became known that there was food inside of it. And that was cooked on Shabbat. Mutar le'ochlo b'Shabbat. You're allowed to eat it on Shabbat. Sharei en kan malechet machshevet klal v'chein kol ki yotze baseh. Because you don't have over here the malechet machshevet at all, like I explained earlier, and any similar situation. Rabotai, all this over here is called mit'asek. Continues Rav David Yosef, and that gives us another case. Aval, however, im nitkaven. Okay, but I remember by mit'asek, by the accident case, you had no idea what was going on. It happened, without you even paying attention. Like leaning on the wall, tripping, or placing the food on the fire, or the oven range, the oven knobs, they went on by accident, meaning that you didn't pay attention to it. But now he's going to speak about what happens if you wanted to do something, you wanted to do something good, but something bad came out of it. Watch this. Aval, however, but what happens on Shabbat? You wanted to do a certain act. You wanted to do something. But you thought by you doing this act, no forbidden malacha, no forbidden labor is going to come out from that act. And afterwards it became known to you that you did a malacha. For example, ukigon, shenitkaven lachtoch asavim. Okay, Rav David Yosef Shlita says, you had kavanah to go ahead and cut the asavim. Let's say you wanted to go ahead and you wanted to cut the grass. Now, doesn't mean like necessarily you wanted to go ahead and cut the grass. It means, lachtoch means to cut, but you wanted, because you can't cut the grass on Shabbat. You wanted to go and take grass which was already cut on Shabbat. V'haya savur, but he thought, shehem tilushim, you see right over here? He wanted to go to take grass, thinking that they were already detached. He asked his wife, let's say you know those nana plants, they smell good, right? You want to get 100 barakot, because on Shabbat it's hard to get 100 barakot. But the problem was, Rabutai, he asked his wife to do it before Shabbat, and she forgot to do it. So now when he went to pick up the nana plants, now he ripped it off. He's thinking in his mind they're already detached. But now he went and he really detached them. So let's see this one more time. For example, he wanted to go and he wanted to cut the nana leaves. He thought that they were already detached because that's what he asked his wife. Now it was known to us that they were actually attached. According to some achronim, the halach over there is going to be as if he's doing a malacha, a forbidden malacha, which is asur from the Torah by accident. Ve'asur lehenot me'oto davar ad moti Shabbat. And you're not allowed to benefit from that thing. You're not allowed to go ahead and smell that nana plant until after Shabbat. So Rabotai, this is the opinion of Rav David Yosef. If you pay close attention, he says, "Ladat kama achronim dinu kidin oseh malacha asur min haTorah b'shogeg." According to some opinions, he wants to learn that this malacha that you did by thinking that it was already detached, but now you went ahead and you actually detached it and it was really attached. Some achronim want to learn it's as if you are doing a forbidden malacha on Shabbat, that you're doing a forbidden malacha from the Torah by accident on Shabbat. And according to Rav David Yosef, he's telling you over here that it is asur for you to go ahead and benefit from that act, from that nana. You can't say borei besamim on it until after Shabbat. Okay? So let's just see this one more time. Aval, however, im nitkaven lasot b'Shabbat maaseh misuyam, but if you had kavanah on Shabbat to do a certain act, but you thought by doing that act, no forbidden malacha is going to come out. But it was known to you later on that you went there and you did the malacha. Kigon. For example, you wanted to go ahead and you wanted to detach, you wanted to take nana plant. You saw that they were detached. You didn't want to do the malacha because you know it's asur to detach plants on Shabbat. Now, after you detached it, now it became known to you that they were attached. According to some achronim, the law of there is going to be as if a person is doing a malacha which is forbidden from the Torah by accident. You're not allowed to benefit from that malacha, even though it was not a real malacha, because you really had the right intention. You wanted to go ahead and you wanted to take the plant thinking that it was detached, but really it was attached, and now you detached it. Over there we're going to tell you that on Shabbat itself you cannot benefit from that plant, but after Shabbat you're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to benefit from that plant. Okay. Now, Rabotai, let's just see the English. Shabbat actions done by mistake mit asek. Now, Rabotai, let's make this clear. Again, these Shabbat actions done by mistake are not the same Shabbat actions done by mistake which we spoke about in part 3 of the Shi'ur. Okay? Case number 1. Completely unaware. Real mit asek. Completely unaware. If someone does something on Shabbat without realizing at all that they're doing an action, that's called mitasek. If someone does something on Shabbat without realizing at all they're doing an action. Example, he leans on a wall and accidentally turns on a light without noticing the switch. Example, while walking he bumps into a switch and turns on the light. Another example, he puts a pot on the fire thinking it's empty, but it actually has food and it cooks. Halacha, it is permitted to benefit from what happened. Why? Because this is not called melacha, forbidden work in the Torah. It's missing Malechet Machshevet. Very important, Rabotai. It's missing Malechet Machshevet, which is what? Intentional planned work, which is what the Torah forbids. Case number 2, intended action with a mistake. If someone intended to do an action but made a mistake in the details. Example, he cuts grass thinking it's detached, meaning he wants to take grass thinking it's detached, but really still attached to the ground. Halacha, many rabbis say this is considered a Torah level violation done by mistake, which is shogig. Therefore, result, you are not allowed to benefit from what you did until after Shabbat. The key difference, Rabotai, is in case number 1, you had no clue that you were doing anything. That's why it's allowed. In case number 2, you meant to act, but misunderstood the situation. That's what we're going to tell you over there, not allowed until after Shabbat. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai La'olam. Amen.